everybody has the opportunity to create Kamma. We create Kamma all the time. We create action, we create conditions, we create causes all the time. But if you can get some understanding of the relationship of cause and effect, your action and its result, then you can take control of it. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. So there's a very important principle that runs through the Buddhist teachings, which is not really talked about very much, not specifically anyway, but it's important that one understands this principle and gets a right view of it. It's the principle of causality, and even though it's not talked about specifically, we probably know about it anyway, indirectly, through the principle of Kamma, and also the practice of Buddhist teachings is based upon doing something, creating a good cause to get a good effect. But unless one is very clear about it, many of us probably still have a lurking fatalistic approach. For example, you hear Buddhists, even Buddhists say, something happens and say, it's just my karma. Meaning more or less, it's my karma and I can't change it. Which of course is a bit ironic because Kamma means change, means action. So if your act creates a result, your next act can change it. But sometimes we have these, kind of residual wrong views, if you like. But and it can even hinder us. It can even trip us up. Especially when we come to meditation and observing our habit patterns of mind, for example. They seem to just go on forever. You think, I just can't change them. I can't change them, but you can. That's important to realize. One can change them. The Buddha said, if you believe that everything you do is due to previous actions, in other words, it's all fixed, no chance of enlightenment. You're a victim of your past. And many people, they are a victim of their past anyway. There's certain things, they make mistakes in their life, and they just say, I'm a victim now, or this is something which is just impossible to deal with. But the Buddha gives us in this teaching of causality, this is a very a different approach to things, a different way of looking at things. Maybe difficult, but it is possible. I'm not saying it's easy, but it is possible. Everybody has the opportunity to create Kamma. We create Kamma all the time. We create action, we create conditions, we create causes all the time. But if you can get some understanding of the relationship of cause and effect, your action and its result, then you can take control of it. And control it through some degree of understanding, through wisdom. Doesn't mean you can, control it directly, because like I mentioned, we have these, I think last time I mentioned about habit tendencies. We have these old habits, these old kind of ingrained patterns keep reasserting themselves. And they do have a strong effect. But we can change them if we have the right attitude. If you have an attitude which is fatalistic, you can't change them, well, you don't then. Don't even try. So you already defeat yourself. But just realizing, oh, there is a possibility there, then we can at least try. And maybe, at the very least, you can make some changes, and maybe not dramatic ones, if you think, okay, I'm going to make some changes. I'm going to be enlightened tomorrow or tonight. I'll be enlightened tonight, okay? Let's not delay. Well, it's a good aspiration, but you have to tune into reality too. There are these strong habit tendencies. You have this. You have the intention, the good intention to be enlightened tonight, but the reality is that maybe there's a few obstacles in the way. So you got to be realistic too. But to keep that option open anyway. Maybe you will be enlightened tonight. Who knows? Yeah, you might just, I don't know. You might be tripped as you go back down to your lodging. You might trip somewhere and wake up and realize, a little trip of enlightenment. It can happen spontaneously. But for most people, it requires the establishing of good causes, some very healthful causes. And basically the Buddha's teaching is about encouraging us to create the right skillful conditions. You can't actually make enlightenment, because the enlightenment, the awakening, Nibbana, is the unconditioned. But we can create the right conditions for the unconditioned to arise. Actually, the unconditioned is here already, see. You just haven't got the right perspective yet, the right view of things. So we just don't see it. Our old habits, our old self-centered habit tendencies block us from seeing it. But it's here all the time. Yeah. Like I say, you might trip on it on the way back down to your lodging tonight. It's there all the time. But how we know about, probably because this teaching of causality is a little bit abstract. It's not being talked about directly, but there is a familiarity with it to some degree in the teaching of principle of Kamma vipaka, that is action and result. And but this Kamma is, causality dealing with the human condition. So it's not quite so simple, because human beings are complicated. So this way we can say it's ethical causality, and it's not necessarily a direct linear causality. The Buddha referred to it more as conditional causality. So the various conditions that come together, just like planting your garden, it's just not a matter of just plopping a seed in the ground, is it? Maybe it works sometimes, but if you recognize, it's got to provide more supportive conditions. Make sure it's fertile soil. Make sure that it's well watered. Keep away the insects. Whatever. The more conditions positive conditions you apply to it, the better the chances that you get some results, some successful results. But it's a matter of recognizing what these are. First of all, knowing there is a possibility, then recognizing, the various conditions there. Likewise, with the same as with the negative conditions of your mind, of your situation. To bring awareness to, these habit tendencies, for example. Try to observe them. Maybe you can see certain patterns arising. When this happens, then that is the result. When some people, they have certain kind of triggers. They have certain triggers, or we say we get our buttons pushed. Do you use that expression here? Somebody pushes your buttons. Yeah, we all have our buttons. Some of them are, deeply ingrained. And if somebody says something, or you see something sometimes. One of my buttons, I admit, is to do with fairness, justice and fairness. I don't know where this came from, but anyway, I don't worry about it too much because it seems sort of, it has a good aspect to it. But when I see injustice, then my buttons get pushed, and I can get very righteous about it, righteous indignation. Even though not much I can do about it, but but I recognize that now. Right, watch out for that one. Watch out for that one. That's a button that gets pushed automatically sometimes. So if you're aware of it, then you can guard your senses, guard your awareness, center your awareness there and watch out for it. And just realize, oh, there's that button again. Somebody pushed it, got pushed. It's not me, it's just the button, And maybe if you are more aware of it, you can recognize some of the preceding conditions, what's leading up to it. And you can head them off then. Just don't go there. Don't go to that place then. If you get caught in some of these habit tendencies, the negative ones, sometimes we compound them sometimes. We get more anxious about them, we get more frightened about them, and just recognize, oh, stop right there. It's just a condition. And if we feed that condition, it'll grow. So you take away the fuel for it. So when it comes to the principle of Kamma, this is even, it's a little bit subtle too, because the Buddha pointed out that Kamma, literally action, in Buddhism is intentional action. Because he was primarily relating to the human condition. So it was your intentional actions that give the result, skillful or unskillful. Accidental actions, it's hard to say there's really accidental ones. The difference between, say, going out there and stepping on an ant intentionally, and just mistakenly, accidentally stepping on an ant. Okay, you accidentally step on an ant. It's not, you didn't do it intentionally with anger or violence, but there was probably obviously some lack of clarity. It wasn't anger, it was confusion. Yeah. So it's not as intense, not as negative. Yeah. Confusion isn't as negative. Well, maybe it is sometimes. Ignorance is the root of all rebirth, But anger is much more stronger self-affirming action than confusion, at least in the short term anyway. But with intention, is also, first of all, just to be aware of the intention is not so easy. If you ever try to observe your intentions, there is, one of them is there's a different ethical quality to intentions. The Buddha points out, basically the skillful actions, unskillful actions. So the skillful intention, unskillful intention. But there's also intensity to it, how intense that intention is. You can just have a fleeting thought of aversion to somebody, not very strong. Others, they have a strong intention of aversion. Maybe they act it out. Not only they get angry at them and actually result in physical activity, physical violence or something. There's a difference between having that, fleeting thought of aversion to acting it out in a physical expression. And then, when it comes to intention, we probably soon are aware that there's different levels of intention. There's this level you can be more conscious of, but in the background there's other intentions there. What the Buddha called the anusaya, the underlying dispositions, underlying tendencies, lying in the background. Of course, the kind of classic one is that you have the intention to help somebody, to do something good for somebody, but behind it is kind of clouded sometimes by you want to help them but your way. I'll help you my way. So there's selfishness in there, see? And even though on the surface it's a very noble intention to help somebody, but underneath it is the selfishness of, I'll help you my way. This is what you should be doing. Rather than actually trying to open up to what's suitable for them, you impose upon them your view of how they should be helped according to you. So if we bring more awareness to our intention, perhaps we're able to notice the different levels there, more and more subtler levels of it. And as you say, it's not that easy because intentions are changing, and sometimes they are reasonably obvious. I mean, in one of the meditation techniques, they give one of the exercises is to try and bring awareness to your intention. When you do something, when you begin walking, for example, what's my intention? But walking, and you can do that, beginning of an activity. You're doing an activity from intention, right? Going here, going there, talking, even being silent. There's an intention behind it. I'm being silent because I can't be bothered with listening to people anymore. I'm silent because, it's a peaceful state to abide in, and maybe gives a good example to other people, But if you bring awareness to those activities, especially when you're changing action, you might be able to notice, what is the intention behind this? Why I'm getting up to walk? Am I fleeing from something, or am I? That's sort of an aversion mode. I'm getting away from this. I sat too long. I have to get away from this and walk. Or there's a greed mode. I'm getting up so I can go get a cup of coffee. Other times it might be just more neutral. Now's the time to get up because the bell has rang. But if you can bring more awareness to intention, begin to notice the more subtler nuances of it. Not only how it does change, but you can begin to recognize some of your own intentions about what's motivating you, what's directing you. And this principle of causality also underlies, of course, the whole practice of meditation, and mental development, learning to develop skillful qualities. So, as I mentioned about different levels of intention, just for example, to bring more awareness, developing mindfulness of intention, begins to change it. Maybe previously you were just unconsciously being directed by a certain intention. For example, just going through the motions. One of our observations is that, sometimes in the monastery, because it is facing the right direction. Oh, hard to see. No time, timeless. Because of the monastic program, our life is quite organized, by time schedule, 4 to 6, and then breakfast, work meeting, etc., etc. Some people, we say, just go through the motions. They just walk around like a robot. They don't really put their heart into it. 4 o'clock, they arrive like a robot and sit down. They don't, you can notice they don't come in with mindfulness. They don't come early. You come at the last minute just to show their face. And so they're going through the motions. But you notice something's missing. There's no life in it. There's no energy in it. So they just, go through the motions. And you say, oh, what's my intention? My intention is to, go through the motions. I notice there's no life in it. My heart really isn't in it. Just going through the motions. That's very important to know. especially early on in monastic practice, because if your heart isn't in it, you're in the wrong place, probably. If not, you won't find out now, but maybe later, and then it's too late. You're stuck in it. But of course, it's also kind of a developmental process as well, because, like I say, different levels of intention, you see. And then there's a little complication, because the Buddhist actually teaching what I mentioned is conditional causality. So this cause and effect processes, they depend upon various conditions. And while you can say causality does sort of harmonize with science to some degree, science is based upon cause and effect. When I was studying science at university, when I came across some book on Buddhism, and I read this book on Buddhism, I said, oh, because of the principle of causality, I said, oh, this is a science. It's not a religion. To me, religion was, believing in things you couldn't prove. But to me, it was more scientific. But there's one aspect of this causality which science doesn't take into account, and that's the quality of the mind. I don't think they do anyway. Maybe to a certain degree, okay, a certain degree, in refined aspects. But especially in meditation practice, the quality of the mind is very important. It's not just having, being mindful of every intention, but what's the quality of that awareness? If you're trying to be aware of your intention and lots of thoughts going on, your mind is a bit scattered, hard to see it. But if your mind is calmer, has more collectedness, more samadhi, has more mindfulness, then the quality of that state of mind increases. And the Buddha even said that the levels of samadhi, for example, I think it was that we could say something like the power of samadhi is one of the unthinkables, incomprehensibles. The power of samadhi, of concentration, the effect this has. And we think of maybe samadhi, concentration, as focused attention. So maybe we look at it a bit like a linear causality. Okay, I'm more focused, so I can, being more focused, I can keep my attention on this information here. But at the same time, there's a different quality to it. When the mind is calmer, the Buddhists mentioned very simply, you can see things as they really are. Like it breaks through many of our preconceptions or our distortions of reality, and the mind is much calmer. It's like you can change your level of consciousness through the practice of samadhi. You're conscious of a different level of reality, if you like. Just for a practical example is when your mind calms down, suddenly you can be aware of the silence. Yeah? It's here all the time. The silence is here all the time, right? But how often do you notice it? Not until I shut up, but until your mind calms down, maybe. If you're able to establish a bit of concentration of samadhi, mind calms down, and your mind isn't calm. It's very noisy, isn't it? Internally it is, so it sounds like it's externally too. It's noisy. But your mind is more focused attention, mind is calmer, and then, inner quiet, outer quiet. Different quality of mind then. And you're able to, usually the mind is collected, so you're able to sustain some awareness over some time. For example, if you notice a certain theme in your mind, if your mind is really scattered, you end up proliferating, thinking about it. Wonder what that thought is. That's an interesting thought. Wonder where that came from anyway. It's gone. But maybe you notice, if your mind's a bit more collectedness in it, you notice a certain thought in the mind, can actually look at it, observe it, maybe even notice how this thought arises, how it's fed by some other thought or memory or association, and it fades away. If you engage with it, it tends to increase. And if you just disengage from it, it passes away. Adding energy to thoughts, you see what that does. You engage with it, you have more interest in it. You like it or dislike it. You engage with it and it gets bigger and it goes here and goes there and back to the breathing again. Quick, throw me your breath, I'm drowning in thought. So developing some of these, and you can say spiritual qualities, as the Buddha referred to, the factor, the spiritual powers, that's why they're called the spiritual powers. They do give some power to the mind in the skillful direction. Mindfulness, energy, wisdom, concentration, and the other one is faith or trust. Trust is one which is a bit hard for many people to believe, to accept these days. That's why I translated it as trust and not faith. Faith for many people just means to believe in it. But trust is just, you can trust that it's true. I don't know yet, but I trust that it is, and then investigate it. Test it out. In this way, we can probe into areas which I don't know yet. Just for example, like your intention, for example. I just trust that, as the Buddha mentioned, that Kamma is intentional action. So if you know the intention, especially negative intentions, if you know them clearly enough, they don't spiral off into action, which can give a result. You can probably cut the chain of cause and effect right there then, to recognize, unskillful intention, it's not very useful to go there, to energize that. So that you can then recognize, it's possible to cut that off. But if we don't have these powers, especially something like trusting in the unknown, trusting in the benefits of the practice, then we just think, it's got to be reasonable first. I noticed living in the West for many, many years, and one of the you could say, one of the difficulties for many Westerners is to trust. They have to have a valid reason. Why do I sit there, watch my breath? And I say, just sit there and watch your breath. If this was within Thailand, I just tell somebody, sit there, cross-legged, and watch your breath. They say, thank you, Ajahn. But in the West, they say, why? Why do I sit there? Have to sit there and watch my breath. I could be reading a book and getting intelligent. Or I could be checking my emails or something, doing something useful. Sitting there, watching my breath. What's the point? Well, maybe you won't check your messages on your phone by sitting there watching your breath, but you can check your breath. And knowing about your breath will tell you about your state of mind. If your breath is not relaxed, if your breath is tense and anxious or something, well, if your breath is very, very quick, very tight, probably you are anxious. And maybe you refuse to acknowledge that anxiety yourself because it's too humiliating. But if you look at your breath gives you a little slap in the face and say, yep, this is, look at, why's your breath like that? Because you're anxious, you fool. But you ask yourself, am I anxious? No, not me. No. But your body is, I can say sometimes your body is much more honest than your mind. If you turn your attention into your sensations in the body, like the breath, you can tell about your state of mind too. Just noticing the breath is not relaxed. Oh, right, that tells me a lot about my mind and my body too. You don't have to, check your mobile phone to find out what your mental condition is. Look at your breath. If you don't know how your own mind is, what's the use of all these messages telling you you're wonderful or you're terrible? Just look in your own mind, you'll know if you're wonderful or terrible. If you feel wonderful or terrible, put it that way. Know your own feeling. So you get some emotional intelligence, not just intellectual intelligence, but some emotional intelligence. Much more valuable in life. But in the developmental course, meditation, spiritual practice is a developmental process. So, having the trust, putting forth the energy, towards developing these qualities, and one can't really say, when you may notice some changes. It's a matter of trust, I guess. The Buddha, talked about the benefits of spiritual practice. It could lead you all the way to Nibbana, even. We have to trust in that, don't we? It could lead us somewhere else, maybe. Yeah? Depends what kind of meditation you do. But when we try to develop these qualities, again, it depends upon past experiences, the past Kamma, and the right conditions. Have they created the right conditions in their life already? And it's hard to say. Yeah. The Buddha did say also that Kamma vipaka, the results of action, are also incomprehensible. They are literally unthinkable. When you think about it, don't. But if you think about it, because we're doing action all the time. As I mentioned, we're doing action all the time, and we're doing action at different levels too. Many times simultaneously. We're acting in a kind of a, you could say more like a conceptual level. There's an emotional level. And there's a background level of that, the unconscious level. Yeah, it's all going on all at the same time. We're acting at many different levels. How can we tell which one gives a result? I think all the best we can do is look at basic principles. If you create the right conditions, the Buddha said, you develop skillful action, you get pleasant results, eventually. Yeah. One of the stories that comes from the Ajahn Chah tradition, Ajahn Chah I wasn't there at the time, but apparently somebody asked Ajahn Chah about practice, and he talks about, doing lots of meditation practice, and he said, but Ajahn, it's supposed to lead to the end of suffering. But since I came here to the monastery to meditate, I'm having more suffering. He said, well, that's the suffering to end suffering, Going without sleep, going without food, living in a simple life. Okay, maybe it's difficult in the beginning, but you got to look at the bigger picture. Where's it all leading to? If you can simplify your life, then we can live anywhere. Maybe in the beginning it's hard to break out of those, that comfort zone, the old familiar habits, but if you can live anywhere then. If you can, learn to go without a lot of sleep, then you have many more hours to meditate. Likewise with food, simplify your eating habits, and we don't realize it, but the young child was programmed to eat 3 meals a day. Just programmed. The young child didn't automatically start to have 3 meals a day. Huh? The young child eats every couple hours, usually, I think. And then we get, in the West we get programmed to 3 meals a day, but in some countries they get programmed to 2 meals a day only. I know the villagers in northeast Thailand, they have their morning meal and the evening meal. But what's normal? But learning to develop these practices, it does take some patience, does take some continuity. But hopefully we have the trust, the confidence in the Buddha's teachings that changes will happen. And sometime we notice that if we continue with the meditation practice, maybe the early years it's just a constant struggle, but eventually, we have moments of clarity. The image Ajahn Chah gave was just, turning the tap. First of all, there's just a little drip comes out. You can say, a little drip of peace here and there, just enough to kind of, whet your thirst, keep you going. Keep going with it. It's like opening the tap a bit more. More moments of peace. More moments of peace. At the same time, it can't be guaranteed either. It's not a simple causal sequence. The more hours I sit there, the more peaceful I'll get. Because it depends on the quality of your mind. Sure, you can sit there, but what's your mind doing? You can sit there for hours and your mind is daydreaming and it's just endless thoughts going on. And I remember one time when I was in Thailand, early years, and I just assumed too that the more time you put in, the quicker the results will happen. So I remember one day probably more than one day, but one day in particular, I was doing my walking and sitting and mind would just not quieten down. This went on and on and on and on and on. So I don't know, it was about, afternoon sometime, I guess. It was cooling down already. So I just thought, I need a break. And it was, the sun had already set behind the trees a little bit, so it was reasonably cool. So I just walked outside my little hut. I just sat there on the edge of there's a little concrete walkway around it. So I just sat down there. I need a break. And I sat there and just looked at the sunlight coming through the trees and nice cool breeze. Just sat there and the mind just went really quiet. Gee, I'm not forcing myself to meditate. And now the mind's quiet. What happened? Is this the way? Don't sit there and cross your legs and try and meditate. Just take a break. And maybe for, 15, 20 minutes, the mind was so peaceful, so quiet. More quiet than it ever was when I was sitting there sitting cross-legged trying to meditate. But after 20 minutes or so, sort of the odd thought came back again, and blah 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 blah. Okay, time to get up and do sitting again. Back to work. And of course, there's the classic story of Venerable Ananda, Buddha's attendant monk. He was in Buddha's lifetime, he was so busy attending to the Buddha and remembering all the Buddha's teachings that he neglected his spiritual practice. That's the story, anyway. So when the Buddha passed away, he was only a Sotapanna. But he was right next to the Buddha most of the time, 20 years apparently. But he only became a Sotapanna during that time. And then because he knew all the scriptures, all the teachings of the Buddha, he was, invited to come to the Sangha Council. After the Buddha passed away, they had a council to meet and review the teachings, Vinaya and the suttas, the Buddha's teachings, Buddha's discourses. And Venerable Ananda was the expert in the suttas, see? But he wasn't an arahant. Only arahants were invited, you see. It was a kind of a group meeting, you see. Only arahants included. Because the arahants should know the teaching, because they've not only heard it, but they practiced it and realized it, you see. But Venerable Ananda wasn't an arahant, so what? The date of the meeting is approaching, but they needed him, but he wasn't an arahant, so he decided to really be very diligent and practice very diligently for the last week or so before the meeting, hoping he can get enlightened as an arahant and then be able to come to the meeting. So he was walking and sitting diligently all day and all night, and he just wasn't making any progress. So finally, he just decided okay, I've been really, really diligent now for the last while, and I just need a break. So the story goes that he would just lie down in his bed, and then he let go, and his mind was enlightened. And of course, they kind of make it a bit poetic that he was in the fifth posture, because they have four postures: standing, sitting, standing, walking, lying down. But he was between standing and lying down, you see. His head hadn't hit the pillow yet. So he was floating. But at that moment, he just decided to, after all that diligent effort, it was like he had too much energy, you see, to balance the faculties. Too much energy made him very restless. Yeah. So he realized he didn't realize it, but it just so happened that he was going to relax the energy. It was just the right balance, and the mind suddenly opened up and was clear, and he could let go finally. Before, he was holding on to this idea of working very hard to get enlightened. Holding on to that idea, he couldn't let go. I've got to be an arahant, got to be an arahant, got to be an arahant. Time is ticking, I got to be an arahant. So, of course, it blocked him from being an arahant, because he had greed for spiritual attainment, you see. The moment he gave up and said, okay, I give up, I'll just relax for a minute, then it happened. So letting go, you see, but doesn't always, sometimes you let go and you just fall asleep. But after all that effort, building up all that effort, concentration, energy, then let go, and then it can happen sometimes. So many different conditions can come together. So the spiritual practice is a little bit like, it is like preparing the ground properly. And we can know to some degree, the Buddha mentions these particular factors, the 5 spiritual powers, factors of awakening, and trying to put effort into those, developing those is helpful. But how do we do it? Maybe some people are just too compulsive. They have too much compulsion. Then you say, back off a little bit. Other people are too lazy. Okay, put more energy into it. There was the analogy the Buddha gave to somebody, to Sona, I think it was. He was also very, very diligent doing his meditation practice, but he just couldn't get any progress either. So the Buddha said, you got to find the middle way, he said. And he gave him the analogy of the lute, which is like a guitar in the Buddhist time, you see. He said, like the strings of the lute, you see, the guitar strings, you have to find the right tuning of them, you see. If it's not tight enough, it's too flat, I think. If it's too tight, too sharp, haven't got the right sound yet. But you recognize that, finding that right tuning requires practice. You are very, very diligent, and you find you get too tense. You got to back up a little bit. Then you find you're too lazy, and you fall asleep. A bit more tension there. But once we have some awareness of these various conditions, we can fine-tune them. Fine-tune them. If we recognize there are these conditions, and they do, in the principle of cause and effect, you find the right causal conditions that give the right causal effect. So like I say, we can't make enlightenment. Enlightenment is beyond causality, but we create the right conditions that awakening can happen. It's like creating the right conditions for the garden to bear fruit. Yeah. The best we can do. Then we wait. We're very patient and wait. Adding more fertilizer and more water, and until finally we see the fruits begin to manifest. And at first, just like in the garden, first of all, just a little sprout, huh? You have little moments of clarity, little moments of peace, but can gain the confidence that it is working. So we keep up with it. And then, then usually, something else comes along. Oh, needs more water. Nope, needs too much water. No, needs more fertilizer. Too much fertilizer. Wrong kind of fertilizer. So it's a matter of trial and error, with using the Buddha's teaching as kind of the template, that have the trust that the Buddha has realized the truth and gives us a skillful template. Now it's for us to put into practice. And we hear the particular teachings, for example, develop more samadhi. What does samadhi mean? You have to practice it first. You have to develop it and find out for yourself. What is mindfulness? What is the benefit of it? Put it into practice in your life, not just read it from the book and say, "Oh, yeah, mindfulness, right?" But it's a whole experience. And when you're in it, then you begin to recognize, you can say, really, it's really an opening up of the experience. Developing more awareness, mindfulness. It's an open-ended process. And maybe you can just say something like, very simply that, once these qualities have come together, that is awakening. The Arahant apparently has mindfulness 24/7, has samadhi 24/7, has energy, has trust to turn to confidence then, has the wisdom, has all these spiritual powers together all the time. For most of us, it's a matter of just putting them together, a bit here, a bit there, and adding this and adding that, and still giving them more energy in our life, more place in our life, and more emphasis in our life, till they all come together and become the natural way of living then. That's what Nibbana is. Having these spiritual qualities, firmly established in our life. Then it's like we can step out of our life, and life becomes those qualities. You don't have to make them anymore. There's no self there to make those qualities. They exist there naturally. It's a natural state of the mind. So it's based upon the principle of causality, and like I say, watch out for those lurking there's actually wrong view to have the view that I can't do it. It's impossible. My karma is blocked. Based upon the principle of Kamma, of action and result. You just keep working at it, and basically if it doesn't work, you aren't doing the right action then. Your action's not in the right direction, the right place. You have to investigate again and find out what is the right action to apply now at this time. Whether it's too much effort, not enough effort, for example, too much. Some people, they get too much samadhi. I heard of people who they use samadhi as an escape. They can escape it. People have very good samadhi, very good concentration. Sometimes they can disappear into it, escape from it, escape from reality. And they think it's enlightenment because they have no suffering there, you see. That was the story of some of the forest ajahns. They were very good at developing samadhi, some of them. Like I was thinking the story of Ajahn Mahabua. He was very good at samadhi, but he recognized he wasn't really, progressing. Then he met Ajahn Mun. Ajahn Mun told him, well, don't go into such deep samadhi, because if you get too much samadhi, you can't contemplate, can't investigate. Your mind is just lost in tranquility. Yeah, I mean, it's very tempting to get lost there if you can, but the thing is that you aren't able to investigate anicca, dukkha, anatta. You need a certain amount of coming out of this deep samadhi, calmness of mind, but just enough that you can still contemplate impermanence, unsatisfactoriness, no permanent self. Otherwise, you just lose yourself in samadhi, which something is a nice holiday, but no wisdom in it. So, we gotta balance samadhi out, samadhi with mindfulness, with wisdom. Of course, having too much, not having enough samadhi is also too much distractedness, too much discursive thinking. So how much is enough? It's always a little bit of a question because different people need different degrees. Maybe some people need quite a bit of samadhi because their mind is very, very restless. But Ajahn Chah's answer was just enough, calm enough, calm enough to investigate, calm enough to contemplate. So you have to know for yourself what that is. And each time we practice, maybe it's a bit different. Sometimes our mind is naturally calm, and then it's, maybe it's not so clear either. Other times, maybe you have to work at a bit more calming down, and so you have to find out for yourself what degree, what amount of these particular qualities is appropriate. So it's something for each one of us to find out for ourselves. So, but once we recognize that there is a causal process here, the right conditions come together to give the right result. So even though it can seem difficult sometimes, even hopeless sometimes, but we keep up with it, keep up our trust, our faith, then we begin eventually to see the light. So hopefully we'll be able to continue long enough, well enough that we begin to see benefits from the practice then. And our confidence, then our trust becomes confidence then. We see it does work. And we can keep going with the practice then. So hopefully you'll benefit from the practice and see results for yourself. So leave that for your reflection.